Right now, somewhere in a backyard or a park or a parking lot at a summer block party, someone is getting absolutely soaked. The Super Soaker has sold over $1 billion worth of units. The man who invented it spent years watching that money flow into someone else's bank account while his lawyers kept the lights on. His name is Lonnie Johnson. He has a master's degree in nuclear engineering. He worked at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory on the Galileo spacecraft, the probe we sent to orbit Jupiter. He spent his days calculating trajectories through deep space. And one winter evening in 1982, he was tinkering with a heat pump he was building in his bathroom in Pasadena, California, and he accidentally shot a jet of water across the room so powerful it rattled the shower curtain on the other side. He stood there, soaking wet, and thought, that would make a great water gun. What followed was one of the best-selling toy launches in history, a licensing deal that should have made him a wealthy man, and a decade-long legal war against one of the largest toy corporations on Earth. A war he largely won, but only after it had cost him nearly everything. Lonnie Johnson grew up in Mobile, Alabama in the 1950s, the third of 6 children. His father was a driver, his mother a nurse's aide. They did not have money for the kind of toys Lonnie wanted, so he built them. At 14, he constructed a go-kart powered by a lawnmower engine. He entered science fairs with robots made from scavenged junk, real robots, ones that moved and responded, and he won. When he showed up to a statewide science competition at the University of Alabama in the early 1960s, he was one of the only black students in the room. He won that too. He went on to Tuskegee University, earned his bachelor's in mechanical engineering, then his master's in nuclear engineering, then joined the Air Force as a research scientist. From there, the path went to NASA. He worked on the Galileo mission, one of the most complex interplanetary spacecraft ever built. He worked on the Cassini mission to Saturn. He held over 100 patents by the time most people his age were thinking about retirement. This is the man Hasbro would eventually decide it could afford not to pay. The invention itself came from a side project. Johnson was working on an environmentally friendly heat pump in his off hours, the kind of tinkering that scientists do when they can't stop thinking. The pump used water instead of Freon as its working fluid. He was testing a nozzle in his bathroom when the pressurized stream of water launched across the room with shocking force and elegance. The arc of it, the distance, the sheer kinetic satisfaction of a jet of water that powerful. He started sketching immediately. A pressurized reservoir, a hand pump to build the pressure, a nozzle shaped to maximize range. The design was simple, intuitive, and completely unlike anything in the toy water gun market, which in 1982 was still selling tiny plastic squirt guns that produced a thin, apologetic trickle. Johnson was imagining something that could clear 30, 40, 50 feet, something that felt like a weapon from a science fiction film. He built a prototype at home using PVC pipe and a 2-liter soda bottle, and he took it to his daughter to test in the backyard. She was drenched within seconds. The neighborhood kids gathered. Nobody wanted to stop playing. For the next several years, Johnson tried to sell the idea to toy companies. This part of the story is often glossed over, but it matters. He was a black engineer walking into boardrooms with a prototype water gun, and he heard no repeatedly from multiple companies who could not see what he was holding. Ertl passed. Johnson kept refining. He made the prototype better, more durable, more dramatic. He tried again. In 1989, he got a meeting with Laramie Corporation, a small Philadelphia-based toy company. He set up his prototype in their conference room, aimed it at a trash can, and fired. The stream of water hit the far wall. The executives in the room laughed. Some of them got up to try it. Within months, Laramie signed a licensing deal with Lonnie Johnson. He called it the Power Drencher. It launched in 1990. Within 2 years, they renamed it the Super Soaker. In 1991, it became the best-selling toy in the United States. By 1992, it had generated over $200 million in sales. It was everywhere, on television, in every toy aisle, in the hands of every kid who had access to a hose and a dream. Johnny Carson held one on The Tonight Show. It was genuinely, undeniably, a cultural phenomenon. Lonnie Johnson was supposed to receive royalties from every unit sold. His licensing agreement with Laramie entitled him to a percentage of the net sales. On paper, as the Super Soaker printed money, Johnson was printing it with the company. Then Hasbro entered the picture. In 1995, Hasbro acquired Laramie. This is the turn that made everything complicated. Hasbro was and remains one of the two largest toy companies in the world. When a corporation that size absorbs a smaller one, the terms of existing contracts don't simply transfer cleanly. Obligations get reinterpreted. Accounting methods shift. And for an independent inventor with a royalty agreement, a corporate acquisition can quietly become a financial disappearing act. Johnson began noticing discrepancies. The numbers Hasbro was reporting, the numbers that determined his royalty payments, did not match what he could observe in the market. The Super Soaker was still selling. New versions were being released every year. Hasbro was expanding the line, licensing the brand, using the Super Soaker name across entire product categories, and yet the royalty statements Johnson received told a different story. A quieter, smaller, more convenient story. He raised concerns, there were discussions, nothing was resolved. And then, in 1999, things escalated sharply. Johnson had been developing a new battery technology, a high-energy lithium battery he believed had massive commercial potential. He had negotiations with Hasbro about potentially commercializing this technology, separate from the Super Soaker agreement. Those talks collapsed, and when they did, Johnson found himself not only without a deal on the new technology, but increasingly certain that Hasbro's accounting on the original Super Soaker royalties was wrong. Deliberately wrong. He sued. The lawsuit that followed was not quick, and it was not cheap. Johnson was not a billionaire. He had his patents, his inventions, his engineering firm, Johnson Research and Development, which he had founded in Atlanta and which employed real people working on real projects. Funding that firm while simultaneously funding a lawsuit against one of the world's largest toy companies put Johnson in a genuinely precarious position. There were years when the outcome was uncertain, when the legal bills were enormous, when Hasbro, with its army of corporate attorneys and its infinite capacity to extend proceedings, held every structural advantage. What Johnson was arguing was specific. Hasbro owed him royalties it had not paid. The accounting methodology Hasbro had used to calculate what it owed him had, in Johnson's view, systematically understated his cut. This wasn't a vague grievance. He had the original licensing agreement. He had the sales data. He had forensic accountants. He could show the math. During this period, the Super Soaker kept selling. Hasbro kept collecting. Every quarter that passed was another quarter of revenue that Johnson had arguably earned and had not received. The legal clock ran slow. The sales clock ran fast. And that asymmetry, that gap between the speed of corporate revenue and the speed of civil litigation, is one of the most effective tools a well-resourced defendant can wield. You don't have to win, you just have to outlast. Johnson did not outlast easily, but he did not quit. In 2013, an arbitration panel ruled in his favor. The finding was significant. Hasbro owed Lonnie Johnson approximately $73 million in unpaid royalties. $73 million. The number is staggering not just because of its size, but because of what it implies. It means that for years, across thousands of transactions, through multiple product lines and licensing expansions, Johnson had been receiving less than he was owed. The arithmetic of the injustice was now on the record. Hasbro disputed elements of the ruling. The company contested the damages figure. The litigation continued beyond the arbitration, as these things often do when corporations have sufficient incentive to keep fighting. The full resolution of what Johnson ultimately received has not been made entirely public, which is itself worth sitting with. We know the court found the debt existed. We know the number assigned to it. What we cannot say with complete certainty is the final dollar amount that actually moved from Hasbro's accounts to Johnson's. What we can say is this: the legal vindication came. It came slowly, at great cost, after years of uncertainty, after Johnson had mortgaged his firm's future to fund the fight. It came with partial opacity around the resolution, and by the time it arrived, Johnson was in his 60s. The Super Soaker, meanwhile, has never stopped. It remains one of the most recognized toy brands in the world. Hasbro still manufactures it. Children who have never heard Lonnie Johnson's name own Super Soakers. Their parents, who soaked their own friends in the backyard in 1991 almost certainly don't know who built it either. The toy is immortal. The inventor required a lawsuit to become legible. Johnson's engineering firm continued its work. He has spent years developing what he calls the Johnson Thermoelectric Energy Converter, a device that converts heat directly into electricity with no moving parts, a technology that, if it performs at the scale he believes it can, would be genuinely transformative for renewable energy. He has continued filing patents. He has not stopped inventing. The man who sent a probe toward Jupiter and designed a toy that soaked a generation is, in his 70s, still at a workbench somewhere, still trying to solve the next impossible problem. This is the part of the story that requires you to hold two things at once. Lonnie Johnson won, partially, expensively, late. The system didn't erase him completely, and that matters because many inventors in similar positions have been erased completely. He had the documentation, the determination, and ultimately the legal machinery to recover something, not without cost, not without years of risk, but something. What the story asks us to reckon with is the structure that made the fight necessary in the first place. A small inventor licenses a product to a small company. The product becomes enormous. A giant corporation acquires the small company. The giant corporation's accounting department makes calculations that happen to favor the giant corporation. The inventor, now negotiating not with the company he signed with, but with a Goliath that never agreed to his terms in spirit, must fund a decade of litigation out of his own pocket just to receive what the original contract entitled him to. There is no scandal hidden in the details here, no secret villain. What there is a system, a legal and commercial architecture that makes it structurally easier to delay payment to an inventor than to simply honor the agreement, because delay is cheap and litigation is expensive, and the party with less money will eventually have to decide how long they can afford to keep the lights on. Lonnie Johnson kept them on, but not everyone can. Think about what we ask of inventors. We celebrate them in retrospect. We put their products in museums. We name them in trivia questions. We teach their stories in school when they're convenient, when they reinforce a clean narrative about American ingenuity and individual genius. And then, in the actual commercial world, where their inventions are manufactured and sold, and expanded into product lines and licensed into brand extensions, we hand the accounting to the corporation that acquired the company that licensed the product, and we say, trust the process. Johnson didn't trust the process, he verified it, and the verification cost him years. The Super Soaker is still in your hands. It's still in the hands of the kid down the street, and the one in the commercial, and the one at the block party getting absolutely soaked right now somewhere in August. The brand is worth hundreds of millions. The inventor had to go to court to collect. That's not a story about one corporation or one toy. It's a story about what we actually value when we say we value innovation, whether we mean the idea or just the profit it generates, and who we think deserves to stand in the room when that profit is divided. Lonnie Johnson is still working. The question his story leaves with you is not whether he deserved better. That's been answered. The question is why it took as long as it did, and how many other names you've never heard because those inventors didn't have the resources to hold on.